Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're here with Daniel Reed, Senior Product Manager at Biamp. I'm Cynthia Weishart, Editor of Sound and Video Contractor. We're here today to talk about a pretty new and important development in the Parlé line that some of you are going to be familiar with. But even speaking for myself, it's gone in directions that maybe I didn't anticipate and that you're going to want to know about. So this is about a suite of integrated capabilities that have been grouped under the Parlé Voice Lift umbrella. This is for the popular Tesira platform, and we're going to get into a little history and context for those of you who may not have been as familiar with the product. So a lot of users are going to have heard of the Parlé tabletop and ceiling mount microphones. They came out in 2019. Since then, Parlé products and capabilities have expanded, but let's take a moment to talk about the core philosophy that are behind the Parlé microphones. Daniel?
Yeah, certainly. And thanks for having me today. Parlé, is in the name. It means to speak. It means voice, right? So that's kind of the intention behind our microphones, right? So we first built the Parlé product family back in 2019, and in fact, the microphones are even earlier than that with our first Tesira and Devio microphones. But we built everything to be optimized for conference rooms, and really what we looked at was said, the microphones are always a challenge in a meeting space. How can we make this easier to install, easier to deploy, easier to set up, while still maintaining very high quality audio? And that's really what the Parlé line means, is that it's simple, easy, and sounds awesome at the same time.
Okay, so I feel like in some ways the market has caught up to something you guys kind of intuited back then, which is that audio quality mattered in the conference room. And then, of course, shortly after we went into COVID, when it, really mattered so much. So you started out understanding that capability, that importance of that intelligibility. Now let's talk about how products and capabilities have expanded.
Yeah, certainly. And what we've developed here is our Parlé Voice Lift solution. And it's a suite of capabilities, like you mentioned, that enable voice lift in spaces. So it's not just about meeting spaces anymore for Parlé. It's about presentation spaces. It's about spaces where large discussions and events might happen. It's to enable presenters to have conversational audio with an audience. It's to enable meeting participants in a large meeting space to have natural, clear sounding audio. The intention of voice lift is in the name of voice lift. It's lifting the audio to the point where you can have a natural conversational sort of level of audio, sort of like you and I are having here, but you can have it at great distances where our voices naturally wouldn't carry and we would have to shout instead. And that's really what voice lift is about, is making things easy and enabling that kind of same philosophy of Parlé, but bringing it into larger spaces.
Right. So taking that intimacy that you were able to achieve with intelligibility even back then, and expanding it into wider settings, and in taking into account, I mean, when guys came up with Parlé, COVID hadn't happened. So now we're in a time where presentations are just as important sometimes as those huddle rooms and things like that. So bearing that in mind, can you give a little insight into the R&D that went into this? Because here you are, you're facing a market that's dramatically changing, and you're bringing a kind of pioneering philosophy that you had brought to Parlé to begin with. So how did those things kind of come together in the years, in the last 5 years to be where we are now?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, there's a lot that's gone into it and a lot of thought that we put into kind of how to build this up over time. One of the things we were looking at with presentation spaces, so things like auditorium, training room, classrooms, things like that. There's always microphones in those space for conferencing, for using Teams, Zoom, any kind of conferencing like that. There's always microphones there. But then there were always separate microphones for the in-room reinforcement. There's, handhelds, goosenecks, worn mics, wireless microphones, all sorts of different types of microphones. Exactly. But those spaces often always still had some kind of ceiling mic system. So we said, wouldn't it be great if we could just install one kind of microphone in this space, it's up in the ceiling, it's out of the way. That's what's really great about ceiling mics in conference rooms is I don't have to deal with things on tables. They're not in the way. I don't have to worry about, is it charged? Is it plugged in? Am I blocking it? Am I too far, too close? That's the great thing about ceiling microphones. And we said that would be awesome to do that in these larger spaces where you have in-room reinforcement happening in addition to the far end reinforcement happening. And so we looked at that and said, well, let's slice and dice this instead of trying to do everything at once for everyone. So we said, okay, well, let's look at the presentation audio. Let's talk about the presenter, the speaker, the instructor, the teacher, whoever that is that's speaking to the people in the room. How can we make this easy for them to use? How can we place microphones over their presentation area, their stage, their front of the room, the area in front of the chalkboard or something? And we figured out how to develop the microphones and update their technology in a way that would allow us to lift the voice in the room and amplify it into the room without having the challenge of feedback, which is a big challenge with this sort of thing. And how can we also make sure that the audio still sounds great to anybody on the far end or watching the recording or something like that? And so there was a lot of different pieces of development that went into that. A lot of different technologies we've developed out of it, but ultimately in the end, it's the same exact microphones as before. It's the same exact signal processors and everything else involved in the system as before. We were able to update through firmware and software updates and enable this whole solution.
Right. So you brought forward the legacy of what had worked, basically as a audio processing platform, but then expanded it with these firmware and software updates. Did anything, and we're going to talk in a minute about participant lift because that's the other piece of this puzzle, but I just wanted to ask real quick did anything change in that time that you were able to leverage, or was this just kind of a natural evolution from where you began?
It's a natural evolution, I think. We didn't have to go and change the microphone array technology, the hardware technology side of anything. We built the technology in the first place to be expandable and upgradable over time. We can control how things are. We added new controls, new functions, new audio processing objects into the DSP. And that's the cool thing about our technology is we can just do that through software updates.
Right.
So we didn't really have to change anything or develop a whole new microphone or build new arrays or anything like that, or really have to install them in any different or special way. It's the same technology we've been using for a long time on the hardware, and we've just evolved the software.
Great. And so let's catch up with part 2 of this, which is as you said, you started with the presenter. Now let's talk about the participant side.
Certainly. So obviously there's a lot of presentations, right, where we're just in the audience listening to that presenter speak. But there's always a Q&A that happens, right? There's always back and forth. There's questions, there's discussions, especially in an education or teaching environment, right? There's a lot of questions that are going back and forth. And we want not only the presenter to hear the question from the audience, we want everybody else in the audience to also hear the questions. And then additionally, we want to capture all of that for, conferencing, recording as well. And so we started with the presenter side of the equation first because we still have a lot of the same technical challenges and considerations to go through. But once we've got that side of the equation great and tuned in and working right, it was actually a pretty short hop to get the presenter or the participant side of things functional. And it's not just about a person in the audience for some kind of presentation. It's also large meeting discussions. There's a lot of meeting spaces that are very large, and the distances between people in those rooms are so great that people can't naturally hear each other without shouting. So that's where the participant lift comes in, is not just participant to a presentation, it's a participant in a large meeting or a large discussion as well. So that's kind of where we liked the term participant. But that was, we developed that and optimized our system to basically handle what is effectively a mix minus voice lift system in that case.
Yeah. Right. So you couldn't even have known actually that an additional layer to this was going to be the way meetings are now recorded and parsed by AI. And so intelligibility has only gotten more important over recent years. So that tells us a little bit about the underlying platform. So can we zero in for a minute on some specific features? I think you mentioned introducing, just user-friendly features. Shall we run through some of those?
Yeah, certainly. Again, this is all done in our Tesira platform. It's a single software environment. We're in control of the audio processing from the microphone element input to the loudspeaker output and everything in the middle. And that's a great spot to be in with the technology because we can control for everything end to end through the system. The specific things we've added are we added the ability to control the beam tracking behavior of the microphone. Beam tracking is awesome. It's great. One of the challenges with it is when you're doing in-room reinforcement, it's trying to find voices, and the beam tracker doesn't necessarily know if it's a far end or a near end. So we've made a bunch of improvements in the way the beam tracking operates and the ability to more explicitly control its behavior, which facilitates it working better in a local reinforcement. One of the other challenges with ceiling microphones of all types and varieties is feedback. The ceiling microphone is further away from the talker. It's up in the ceiling. That also means it's closer to the source of reinforcement with the loudspeaker. So it has a higher propensity to get into feedback. What we developed is a lightweight frequency shifting feedback suppression algorithm. And what that does is slightly offsets the spectrum coming out and breaks the feedback loop. Feedback is just energy looping through the system and building up. But we break that with the frequency shifter. It's a really lightweight algorithm. It's really low latency. It doesn't really distort speech, so you don't have to worry about artifacts like that. And it completely prevents the system from ever getting into the state where you hear that screaming, howling feedback that sends everybody running for the door. In addition to that, there's a bunch of other enablers that we've created in the system for ease of deployment. We have design tools that we've created to help design the spaces. We have a voice lift calculator to help calculate all of the routing and gain mixing that needs to happen in a voice lift system. So on the participant lift side of things. And we've made creating the Tesira programming layout really easy. You can do it directly from the software with kind of what we have is a dynamic template in our processing library that lets you input the number of mics and speakers you want, and then we build the entire signal chain in the middle of that. So there's a lot of great technology that makes the system work well, sound great. And not just that, but we wanted to make it easier to deploy the system as well and get it running.
Right. So there's things there for the user experience that my audience is integrators, a lot of them. There's things they can, acquaint the end user with that are going to give them a more powerful experience. And then at the same time, they're going to be able to have a smoother installation. Was that part of the philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from the end user perspective, there's the daily meeting room user or the space user who wants to just go in there and have a meeting, right? I don't want to have to talk to someone in the AV department to book the room, make sure that there's an operator to help me with the microphones and everything. I want to be able to just book a space and go in there and just have a meeting. We've used this technology in our own corporate auditorium here at our headquarters, and I can just book that space right now and walk in there, go to the podium, plug in my laptop, and my audio is already being amplified in the space. It's really easy for users to just do this and get it running by themselves. And that's a huge advantage, right? Yes. It just removes friction. For the AV space owner, the AV or IT manager involved in that space, they don't have to worry about, again, this really high value space sitting underutilized or having to have a person free and assigned to make the space usable, or have to go prepare the space every time to make sure that all the technology is functioning. Again, that self-service is not just great for us using the spaces every day. It's great for the people who own and manage the spaces. On the integrator side, we've a lot of different advantages using this solution from Biamp. Again, it's a single software ecosystem environment, so everything is done from one spot. It's all from Biamp, so you're just talking to us, you're dealing with us, you're getting support from us on it, not bouncing between different manufacturers, trying to figure out how to get everything running or diagnose any kind of issue that might come up. Again, there's a lot of those enablers I mentioned earlier that make this a lot easier to get the system deployed, running, to do the initial designs. Voice lift systems are complex. There's a lot of physics involved. Yes. They're time consuming. And we looked at all those steps and said, how can we make this easier for the integrator who's doing the design work, who's doing the installation work, the setup work, the programming work, the commissioning work? How can we make this easier and easier and easier for them to use? And that's kind of the core of our philosophy here in product development is how can we make things better for the integrator, not just the a great, extraordinary experience outcome, but also just the entirety of everybody who has to go through it, even all the way back through procurement. We're not placing orders with different vendors. We're just buying everything from Biamp, right? So a lot of great advantages I think that we've built into the system, and we're always thinking beyond the technology, beyond the product, into the holistic experience with just using our product end to end for everyone involved.
Well, and yeah, and that sensitivity is really important because an integrator is convincing an end user that this is the solution to their problem. And then to be able to smoothly execute, there's nothing like that. To be able to walk in and really deliver on what the product has promised because you've thought of what the integrator needs to make that dream come true, so to speak. So, okay, so given all this, what do you think the target markets are?
Yeah, I mean, there's several different markets and different kinds of spaces where this can be utilized. Like I said, there's education spaces, conference or actually, yes, conference rooms and education spaces, but also, the classrooms, the teaching spaces, the teaching environments, those group instructional environments, lecture theaters, those kind of spaces benefit from Voice Lift definitely. On the enterprise side, there's training spaces, multi-purpose spaces, all those kind of spaces where maybe you have furniture that moves around
Yep.
event to event and you can't fix things on tables. Ceiling mics become an excellent solution for that. And then government spaces as well. So there's a lot of different types of town halls or discussion spaces, meeting spaces, things like that, where Voice Lift is a massively beneficial technology to just making that event go a lot smoother.
Yes, and it really makes you wonder if now with recording, with far end, near end, coming into the presentation space, not just into the huddle room space, is that relevant to these capabilities?
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the great things of doing this all in Tesira. It's the same system you're using for the conferencing for the far end. You don't need to go and install a redundant pair of microphones for local reinforcement versus capture for recording of the far end. It's the same microphone you're using for both. And even if the space doesn't necessarily need one or the other capability, they're both present there.
Yes, and you never know what people's needs will change, so you want to have confidence that you've got a platform that can move with them. So you mentioned Tesira. Let's talk a little bit about how this works within the Tesira ecosystem.
Yeah, certainly. So I did mention earlier, so one of the things we have now is kind of a dynamic template that we built into the processing library inside Tesira. So it's really easy to get a file constructed with the right number of input channels and output channels automatically, and all the processing in the middle. So we'll right size the mixer objects, the EQ objects, the inputs and outputs. We'll set everything correctly for the number of channels you need. So it's a lot easier to get the file programmed and constructed. Again, we have built into the Parlé mic controls the new functions to directly aim the beams, control them, go back and forth. One of the cool things about that is it's a runtime setting. So you can switch back and forth dynamically through control systems, presets, anything like that you want to. So like we just mentioned, the different types of environments or the different types of usage throughout the day. We don't necessarily have to have the system exactly configured the same way every time. There could be a control panel on the wall that has specific options or orientations of furniture, and the user can hit that, and the system is optimized for that automatically. So we don't have to take the system down, reconfigure it, put it back up every time. It's on the fly. We can change things, which is really cool.
So those presets, that sounds awesome. Just even for the user, without an integrator, just walk in and choose the application from the wall. That seems very powerful. Are there any other aspects of Tesira that we didn't cover just now?
Yeah, sure. In addition to the power of the presets, which has been something that Tesira's had for a long time, we've just again used the power of our platform to evolve. We have the new frequency shifter object, and that's the new feedback control mechanism that we have in the system, so that can be added in as well. We have a new import to the mixer objects. So all of these complicated routing and gain settings and mixing settings that need to go into making a mix minus system, we can import that through a spreadsheet now. So rather than someone going through the labor of typing cross point by cross point, which can get very big over time, especially in larger spaces, that can be imported really quickly. One of the other advantages of our whole ecosystem here inside Tesira is that, again, because we're in control of all the processing, the beamforming algorithm, the echo canceling algorithm, we can actually do AEC echo canceling channels per microphone rather than per beam of microphone. So we can do it per microphone, which means that we can optimize the DSP usage and the cost of DSP. So rather than needing, an AEC channel per beam of the microphone, for example, the TCMX ceiling microphone, the Parlé TCMX, that has 4 beams in it. A lot of traditional systems and integrations with this kind of technology would require a channel per beam. That'd be 4 channels per microphone. But in our case, we can do it per microphone. So we have 1 channel of AEC. So that optimizes the cost of the hardware, the time to set up the system, the time to commission it, everything. So that's one of the real powers of our system here.
So with some of these capabilities, is there some design support at Biamp? Like if someone is, in the middle of speccing a system, they can find out some of these advantages that they may not initially be aware of?
Yeah, so there's several different resources that we have. We have our Cornerstone knowledge base, which a lot of our integrators are familiar with. It's a great wealth of knowledge across all of our products. We've set up a new series in there of articles on Voice Lift and the best practices for evaluating the space, optimizing the space, selecting the right parts for the system, the right speaker types, the right mic placement. And it goes through the entirety of all of the planning, designing, deploying, commissioning steps that go into the system. So it's a very extensive set of article that our applications engineering team has created. We also have our design tools. So we have the presentation space designer that's accessible through Cornerstone as well. And that lets a user go in there and define the size and dimension of their space, and will calculate where microphones and speakers need to be placed to make a system effective. And then there's a PDF export from there as well that gives you all the little details and information to show there. And that's great for anybody who's curious if their room is going to work for Voice Lift to go in there and just put that information in. In addition to that, we have a field sales engineering team that's global. So any integrator can get in touch with our teams and get their own kind of self-service support, learn more about the technology, see if the spaces they're working on are going to be suitable for this, and also get some design guidance and input from our team as well.
So that's pretty powerful backup right there. Good to know. We'll put those links in the transcript for people to be able to find it. And then, so once it's installed, let's talk a little bit about after the install support. Is there remote monitoring capability?
Yeah, so certainly. We have Biamp Workplace, which is our cloud ecosystem platform, and that provides a few different powerful capabilities. Remote monitoring and management, definitely. That's what we have with there. Tesira is part of that platform. We can get all sorts of fault information. If a microphone goes offline, if an amplifier goes offline, if there's any kind of fault, channel fault, signal faults, if a fan in the DSP starts to die, anything that could happen, we know about. We know down to the capsule. If you get a single element in the microphone that starts to fail, we'll have a message that goes out into the system, and that's available through Biamp Workplace. In addition to just remote monitoring, Workplace has Workplace Command and the new Workplace Control that we announced at InfoComm. So Workplace Command allows an integrator to remotely see the status of a Tesira system. They can look at the state of meters. They can see activity remotely. So they can remotely check to make sure that the system is running in the appropriate state if the user had some kind of complaint. And then in addition to that, like I mentioned, the Workplace Control Platform is our new control platform. It's integrated with Tesira as well. So that provides a lot of capabilities for not just remotely monitoring the system, but also in-room control as well that runs on the DSP.
Right. So that's some powerful new capabilities that people are just having added to their system options. So thank you for sharing about those. So let's do one last question before we wrap up. We've all been around Biamp for many years. We kind of know what you guys stand for. From this experience and your now 50 years of audio, what about this is most relevant to today's market? And And how was your guys' philosophy, you know, really centering in this market?
Yeah, certainly. So 50 years of audio. So first and foremost, we want the audio to be extraordinary, right? Like regardless of anything else, how easy we make it, how frictionless we make it, we want it to just sound awesome. We want people to go in there and be like, yes, this is great. I love using Biamp because it just sounds great every time. Um, but in the market today, I think there's a lot of pressure on integrators to get things done faster, to get them done quicker. There's other kinds of channels that are competing for attention that the integrators are competing against. And I think we're positioned uniquely to make things quicker for the integrator to understand the technology, get the technology deployed. I mean, one of the cool things about Parlé is they're all cat cable connections, right? It's just standard cat cable infrastructure. We don't need to worry about soldering XLR cables or anything like that. We've made it just easier and easier and easier because we recognize that integrators are under a lot of pressure. And so we want to make everything as frictionless as possible for the integrator. And then, of course, on top of that, end users we're all busy people. We want to get stuff done. We don't want to fuss with technology. We want to just get our work done, get our message out, have our discussions, get our decisions made, and not have to fight with a battery that's dead somewhere.
Yes, correct. And that's only become more the case as people's, workflow is not just nice to have conferencing, nice to have presentation and remote, but also essential to continue.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned COVID earlier too, and the world is still very much hybrid, with people on site collaborating together in real time, and people that are remote who can't be there on site together all the time, also being part of the event. And so we're elevating the in-room experience and the remote experience to be the same in this kind of working environment.
Which is so important for all of our daily lives. Well, I really thank you for taking some time to run through this today. I learned some things I didn't know, and I've been aware of Biamp for many, many years and tried to stay close to your products. And I learned some new things too. So hopefully, our audience the same, and they'll know to reach out if they have further questions, and you guys will be there for them. So thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you for having me today.